Welcome, everyone. Insights is the name of the program with Bob and Mike. I'm Bob Wright. 206-619-3274. 206-619-3274.
And I am Mike Walsh. 310-383-1570 is where you can reach me. That's 310-383-1570.
And give us a call if there's ever anything we can do to help you, give you an idea what your building is worth, if you'd like to market your building, whatever your needs might be. We try to tailor our podcasts and editorials to what might be of interest to real estate investors. And to that end, we're always open to suggestions and ideas. And interestingly, at the top of that list of people you would like us to interview was Pat O'Day, partly because in his latter years he transitioned into real estate, a logical move with someone with his talent at communication.
Yeah, he was the owner of a Windermere franchise in the San Juan Islands and a successful developer as well.
Yeah, but more importantly, because he was Pat O'Day and because he was a part of your memories, cruising Alki with the radio blaring at the concerts and the sock hops, the Beatles, the Stones, Jimi Hendrix, the hydroplane races, all of it. Pat O'Day was Seattle. Seattle was Pat O'Day.
Yeah, I remember you emailed him last week to set something up, and we're slightly confused. We never got a response, unfortunately.
Yeah, and of course we all know why. On August 4th, Pat O'Day passed away.
He was such an influential figure in the Northwest, and as an honor to him, we're going to do our podcast anyway. So today's podcast is about Pat O'Day.
Because Pat O'Day was a friend and my employer.
So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, when I was in high school, it was a small high school in Haley, Idaho. There were no radio stations locally, and we all listened. We'd tune the radio with the static and the whistle, and we'd tune in the Wolfman beaming in on his 50,000-watt signal from his tower that he'd placed just across the Mexican border to avoid FCC regulations and power limits. And there was Charlie Tuna from KOMA in Oklahoma City that would come in when we'd have atmospheric skips.
Now, was that one of the guys that was on the radio in the background in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
That was the real Don Steele, who was Charlie Tuna transitioned to KHJ in Los Angeles, but he was on in the mornings, and then Don Steele called himself the real Don Steele. He was on in the afternoons, and that was the voice that you heard in the Hollywood movie. Okay. But my love affair with radio really began, I suppose, when I was 13 years old and a service scout at the 1962 World's Fair. I lived in southern Idaho, but the service scouts came from all over the country. We were guides at the fair, and we were housed at what was then Fort Lawton in one of the barracks, now Discovery Park. And I remember the dining room in the afternoon would blare out KJR and a personable, energetic Pat O'Day. That was when I first heard the voice of Pat O'Day. Someday, I told myself, I'm going to be like you, Pat O'Day, at KJR.
So did you ever make it to KJR?
I'm getting to that. My first radio job, it was a far cry from KJR. It was KSKI in Sun Valley, Idaho. Then, when I attended the University of Idaho, it was KCLX and Colfax, calling hog futures and playing Penny Lane. And then it was KRAM in Spokane, KONA in the Tri-Cities, Cairo in Seattle, KVI, KQIN, which was a country gold station in Seattle, KASY, KAYO, KZOK, KNBR, KUUU, KTNT, every single station in Seattle except KJR. Try as I might, I just could not get in that door. Well, that's not exactly true. I was hired as afternoon newsman back in 1975 for about 5 minutes. When I showed up on the first day, turns out they had fired the news director, the guy that had hired me. So it was like a revolving door. I went in, shook hands with everybody, and went out the door again.
So how'd you end up in real estate?
Well, it was about that time I was contemplating a career change into the commercial real estate field. And I went to work for a firm called Capretto and Clark, which at the time was the boot camp of commercial real estate, kind of like Marcus and Millichap is today. And after I'd been there for a couple of years, I get this call from a fellow named Rick Scott. Says he's program director of KJR and he's offering me a job. And I didn't want to give up real estate, but I didn't want to give up this opportunity either. So I went to work for KJR part-time as their weekend morning man. And Pat O'Day was there as a consultant. And I'll tell you, I learned more from Pat O'Day in those few years at KJR than from all previous years at all of the other radio stations.
Yeah, I was too young to have listened to him directly on the radio, but I remember a story. My dad and my uncle were walking in Friday Harbor one time, and they passed this Windermere storefront, and they hear this voice from inside, and they go, "That's Pat O'Day." It was that recognizable.
Oh, a very, very distinct voice. Pat was brilliant in the way he approached radio. It wasn't just his voice. I mean, Pat understood people, and he understood the relationship that people had with music. I remember he used to tell us, the star is not the DJ. The star is the music. He'd drill it into us. He'd say the DJ was the frame that showcased the picture. And the picture, of course, was the music. Everything the DJ said had to be relevant to the music, to the listener, the community. He rammed it into us. Music is emotional, Pat would say, and he insisted that we fit our voices to the mood of the music and to the pace of the music. And whenever we went into a music set, he would insist that we pot it up full blast. He said, "Don't worry about the distortion. The limiter will handle it. It has the effect of an explosion." And no other radio station did that. And a perfect example is the opening of Bad Moon Rising, that bum, 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 bum drum beat. When played on KJR, it was unlike anything you heard on any other station. It was just like magic in our memories, just because Pat knew how to make those memories. He had these characters, Granny Peters, Mr. KJR. It was all theater of the mind, which was what radio was back in the 40s. Pat borrowed a page from that script, and I'm sure as a kid he listened to all those programs, Gunsmoke, Inner Sanctum, Amos and Andy, Burns and Allen. I mean, everybody knew that Granny Peters was Pat, but they didn't care because he created this image in your mind of this crinkly old lady that looked like Pat O'Day minus the teeth. And we all knew that Mr. KJR didn't exist. But again, Pat created the image. Probably everybody had a different image of what Mr. KJR was. I always thought of him as this irascible boss in a pinstripe suit, little thin-lipped mustache. He was always scolding Pat for the crazy things that fell unscripted out of his mouth.
Yeah, you would sort of have these crazy impromptu bits that he'd do.
But you know what? I'm sure there were parts that were unscripted that fell out of his mouth. But in truth, it was all carefully scripted. Pat spent hours planning his radio show. Plus, I got to hear all of the stories.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the acts that he brought to town and guys that he developed here locally.
Oh gosh, Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin. I remember one story in particular about he brought the Beatles to town, and they stayed at the Edgewater, and he rushed them back to the hotel in an ambulance, while the limos and the taxis acted as decoys. So all of the screaming teenage girls were chasing the limos and the taxis, while the Beatles were really in the ambulance. It was pretty creative. And then there was a time after a dance at Garfield High School that this gangly kid walks up to Pat and he says, "Mr. O'Day, I would just like you to know that I'm going to be somebody someday." And do you know who that kid was?
I bet that was Jimi Hendrix.
It was Jimi Hendrix it was. Indeed it was. And by the way, KJR was the first radio station in the United States to play the Beatles. Murray the K in New York would probably disagree with that, but it's true. I believe Pat. Pat tells a story of how they got this package, and the Beatles. What a crazy name! He takes this package into his office. He opens it up and he puts the record on the turntable, and he says, any group with a creative name like the Beatles, spelled B-E-A-T, like a drum beat, not like the insect, B-E-A-T. Oh, and by the way, it had 2 T's on this particular record, which I'm sure makes it quite valuable. And he said he liked the record, and anybody with a creative name like the Beatles deserves airplay, so he put it on that evening. Do you know what the name of that record was?
No, I don't.
Please, Please Me.
Oh.
You'd think it would have been I Want to Hold Your Hand or one of those, but it was Please, Please Me, which actually I like better than I Want to Hold Your Hand. And me? Hey, I got my chance. I got my chance to work under the guidance of the Godfather of Northwest rock and roll. Me, Bob Wright. Finally, Finally, I made it. Here's a little clip of that.
Seattle's 95 KJR. Barb right this morning at 20 minutes after 7 o'clock. We got a great day for you and a great evening tonight at 7 o'clock. You got the Atlanta Hawks, the Sonics game from the Coliseum. And right after that, Dick Barley's Rock and Roll Radio Oldie Show. And Dick will be featuring bands that begin with the letter T, such as the Temptations, which have one of their songs right after this.
Have you got your pearls on? Pearls?
From Pearl, I take
95 KJR Seattle weekend weather. It looks like you're going to get a little bit of sunshine today with high cloudiness and mid-40s for the high. Not too bad for a weekend. 36 up in Everett, 35 downtown. At Seattle's 95 KJR.
Pretty crazy,
That is
huh?
pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you for the memories, Pat O'Day. You made our lives sparkle with your magic. You truly did. You will forever be a part of our lives. God bless you, Pat O'Day. God bless you.
This is KJR, serving the Pacific Northwest from Seattle.
Patrick O'Day! What a day I had yesterday. You know, it's Boeing's 50th anniversary. Happy birthday, Big B. They put on an air show for the families of the employees at the Renton Airport. And you say, why were you there, Pat? I may end up there someday. Anyway, took the boat down, sat on the lake. I hope you had a chance to see it.